All right, we're live for another edition of the South China Morning Post Mixed Martial Arts Live Chat Q&A. Today, I got with me someone old and someone new. You know, an old guest returning and a new guest, coming on. First off, let's get into the new guest is Scott Fontana of the New York Post. Scott, appreciate you, man, for coming on. I know you don't really make many appearances on podcasts, so it's an honor.
Hey, I'm willing to do more. It's not for lack of wants, but thank you very much for the invite, John. I appreciate it.
No doubt. Now, the other guy on the mic, Dan Tom, of course, my guy. He is doing the breakdowns. Go check his stuff out on his podcast and of course on MMA Junkie. And yeah, I feel like all three of us have like different perspectives on the sport because we kind of take it from different angles. So it's gonna be a fun chat today. Today on the docket, I got of course we're gonna get to the questions when the questions come in, but I want to talk about McGregor taking the trilogy against Poirier, and is it too soon? You know what I mean? Does he have enough time to kind of come back and be a better fighter than he was in the second fight? And then we'll get into the Holland Vettori fight and the Ultimate Fighters coming back officially. You know what I mean? We thought it would never come back, but it's happening. And maybe Dan Tom could get into the doors over there in Vegas and see what's happening. Maybe not. And then we'll talk about the Venom fight kits. A lot of people have their opinions on it. I have my opinion. Dan, Scott has his opinion on it. So we'll get into that. And if you got questions, put them in the chat. We'll answer anything you want. And yeah, let's start with McGregor and Poirier. Poirier, he passes on the title shot, and understandably. Let's get into that first. Scott, we'll start with you. You know what I mean? Like, was it a mistake for him to pass on the title shot? Do you think the title shot will eventually come back to him, or maybe it'll fizzle away?
I don't think it's a mistake for him because this is the money fight. He's going to make a lot of money on this, and I think we all know that. And at the end of the day, these guys only have a limited window to make that money. I can't begrudge him.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, Dan, how big of a red penny night do you think this is going to be for Dustin Poirier? You know what I mean? Because that's what they talk about. Now we got red penny night and green penny night. Who's going to come with the purple penny nights and the pink penny night? I don't know. But, like, how big of a payday do you think, like, Dustin Poirier is going to get? Is it that significant?
I once saw a karate teacher of mine in a Victoria's Secret, suspectly by himself. I don't think he was preparing for a big payday, but I do think it's going to be a big enough panty night, as you're saying, to where I too, like Scott, do not begrudge anyone, much less anyone like Poirier taking that. So I'm kind of in that same boat. And yeah, you're right, John. Like, we can get lost in this panty talk, but rest assured, both McGregor and Poirier. They seem to, if we're just like going by like the smiles on their faces, they seem to have really big smiles on their faces, which, as you guys know, is not always the case when fighters talk financials with the UFC.
Exactly. Well, we've seen it with John Jones right now, right? John Jones, they're I guess there was the rumors coming out that they were going to put Francis versus Derek Lewis in, what was it, in June? Am I correct? Dan, do you remember that?
That sounds familiar. Yeah, I don't want to swear on it live, but that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then Francis, I believe Francis said that he wasn't going to be ready by then. So, but was it out a tactic? Do you think? Let's start with you, Scott. Do you think that was a tactic, kind of to get John Jones to sign the contract for less money? I don't know. Am I digging into it too much?
A tactic from the UFC to
get
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's all posturing when they're doing it out in the open like this, and even if it's leaked, you have to look at it as this is some sort of tactic. It's always in order to get what they want for the best deal that they possibly can. So they're doing, this is just, I don't know this, but this is just me looking at it and use my brain here. I would have to think that they would really love to get the John Jones fight, but they don't like what he's doing in terms of trying to maximize his value. So they said, all right, let's see if we can do it another way.
Yeah, I love that John Jones is trying to maximize his value, but could this backfire? That's the only worry I have for John Jones, that this could backfire and like more time will pass? You know what I mean? Would more time passing be beneficial for John Jones because he is making that transition to heavyweight, and it will just allow him to get better and better in training? Do you think that will be something that will be beneficial for him by delaying his heavyweight debut, Dan?
In theory, I think the knee-jerk reaction is to say yes, because most fighters, whether they're in this situation, which granted, not the biggest sample sizes to draw from, but in general, when it comes to opportunities, big shifts, more often than not, whether it's the fighter playing the part or the promotion kind of hanging that proverbial bone, we usually see them move too fast. So in that sense, yes, more prep is good. Layoffs aren't necessarily a bad thing when you get older and have that ring time as Jones. So the typical hurdles, if you will, maybe aren't there. However, I still will argue that maybe it could be bad, or not maybe bad, but meaningless or null and void, so to speak. Because if going up to heavyweight and carry that frame and the way John's doing it, it's still suspect to even see how he's feeling with that frame. Will it give him more time to adjust in training? Sure. But without fights, that just kind of increases the already intangible X, which is, ring rust, right? Ring rust now coming back with the bigger frame. So it still balances on both sides for me.
All right, we veered off into John Jones talk. Let's get back to the Conor McGregor Poirier trilogy. Now,
but before we do, I do just want to say really quick, the idea that there's something going to backfire for John Jones, it's never happened before. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny on its own.
yeah, for sure. Now, with going back to Conor and him returning on July 10th, I believe, against Poirier in the trilogy, is that too soon? You know what I mean? Do you see the result being any different? Do you see a better Conor? What does Conor have to do? Because I was talking to Dan Hooker, right, and I asked him the same question, and he said Dan Hooker's Conor's coming back way too soon. He shouldn't even take the trilogy. He should probably take some time and fight somebody else and then come back to the trilogy, because he thinks that the result is going to be the same. What do you think, Scott?
There's a lot. I'm very conflicted with this fight, and Conor and really himself. Just the fact that he actually didn't look that bad in the first round of that fight. He did win the fight on the scorecards, and I think we all kind of thought he was getting off to a pretty decent start. He was absorbing kicks, but at the same time, he was doing enough damage to be winning that fight. We didn't know it was going to end up the way it was, but of course it did. To get back to whether it was too soon or not, I mean, how much more time is he going to need to get better at stopping these calf kicks, which were obviously the downfall there? I don't know if he's going to need a year to get there or not. I do think though, maybe he really should have tried to pursue a different fight, because and that's the thing with Conor, is he's so single-minded with, like, if I lose, I have to get that back, like, right away. He did it with Nate. He's doing it now. He wanted it with Khabib and he never got it. He's just so dead set on avenging the defeat, but he never wanted to give it the other way, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, with Dan, with this, what I mean, like, when you broke down the second fight heading into it, what was your prediction on the fight? I don't remember exactly.
I actually picked McGregor to win, but it was one of those ones where I kind of laid out how the guy who actually won was going to win. And I specifically laid out something that almost no one was talking about before, as they don't with Southpaw versus Southpaw matchups. Something that I dare say I specialize in, but it was the check right hook. And I think that is more the X factor here, not the calf kicks. I think if people, it's rightly so whenever you look into guys like Dustin Poirier himself or Jim Miller and his exchanges, and how both those guys kind of wore leg kicks both by giving and receiving them, and there can be long damage. I think Bilal was more of a question going into that Edwards fight, right off the Diego Lima fight. That was a much quicker turnaround. Bilal suffered much more damage, whereas the calf kick certainly played a factor, but I don't believe is as much of a factor as everybody's kind of blown it up postscript. And to Scott's point, not only do I believe that you don't need the 6 months to recover or learn how to defend calf kicks, even to Conor McGregor's own sample size, which was under 6 months, when you look at the UFC 196 to UFC 202 turnaround, where McGregor, who never threw a leg kick, and I believe what was 22 fights at that time, decides to throw leg kicks, which to his credit, still one of his best performances, right? He showed to adjust in the long end. He showed to bring in leg kicks. So any of that leg kick talk from either side is nonsense to me. I think the more thing to look at is him recovering from getting stopped. I think that's the more damaging. That's the more detrimental. That's the more damning thing to Conor McGregor, who's always had a great chin. He was put out cold, arguably almost twice there by Poirier. That's something to watch for. However, he will be coming up at the exact 6-month mark. So I don't consider that a flag. If he was coming in under the 6-month mark, any fighter, that being said, under the 6-month mark from a knockout loss, a loss of consciousness, there's a flag for you. However, Conor's right above it or right at it. So, not too soon.
I also picked McGregor to win the fight early in the fight. Like the first round, Scott was talking about, he was looking good. I felt like that was his chance, because Poirier, am I wrong? But I think he starts slow in a lot of his fights, right? He kind of builds up and builds up and builds up, and then he just starts beating the shit out of people, right? And it's rare that you see him like come out like a bat out of hell and take somebody out in the first round. I don't know how many first round finishes Dustin Poirier has, but whenever he loses, it seems like he loses in the first round, right? So I was banking on that in that second fight because, of course, Conor carries that power. But now when you look at it going into the third fight, and I just think, mentally, is Conor the same? Is he that mental giant that we saw, heading into the Eddie Alvarez fight, heading into even the Cowboy fight, right? Can he come back from that knockout loss, so quickly? Because, you see things on social media, but it's social media. We could put anything out there on social media, right? Like I could make an OnlyFans right now and people would not watch it, but that's something different. But yeah, you got to pay the money. You would watch it. All right. Thank you. Dad would be the only one. But, with Poirier, I think he's a guy right now. He knows that he holds all the cards and he's striking while the iron is hot. Scott, it's perfect, right, for Poirier.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, like I said earlier, I think this is a no-brainer fight for him. I would have to think he's got to be very confident coming off of this one to think that, if I did this before, I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to earn that title shot anyway. So I'm just going to get paid first, and then I'll do this later. You have to think like that.
Yeah, and just to go too far into the future, like you said, if he goes into the third fight, he finishes Conor. If he beats Conor 5-round decision, it doesn't matter. He wins the fight, right? That's all that matters. Then he gets that title shot automatically. And if he goes on to win the title, man, that's an incredible story, right? Would you retire if you won the title? Like you made all the money you can make.
Yeah, it's easier said than done. I'm not a fighter, so yeah, of course, I would probably retire after I won my first belt. I'd be like, all right, that's no need, just take the picture. Let's just end the story here. I've seen this story how it goes too much. Of course, that's objectively speaking and unfairly speaking, right? So we know fighters aren't necessarily wired that way. Would I though? Yeah, I would.
Yeah, with also Conor was talking about like belts too, right? And he was talking about, we should make the Conor McGregor belt. And I've seen some other shows they're talking about it. And if the UFC made a Conor McGregor belt, how weird would that be, Dan? Like to have someone's name on a belt, and if you lose it, like Dustin Poirier beats Conor McGregor, now he's the Conor McGregor champion. Like what? Isn't that weird?
It's not weird when you consider the money belt that they tried to do with gator skin or whatever, let's be honest, I still want to see, Nico Price and Mike Perry throw down for the Florida man belt, which would also be alligator skin, probably mixed with some, pharmaceutical casings. Neither here nor there. The point is, unless you're making these belts so we can put them together like Dragon Balls and the fighter can make a wish to where there's actually a reward for collecting them, then I could care less, to be honest. I know I'm gonna be the boomer zoomer here, but I'm not one for the big belt talks, and I was kind of reigning on this champ era before we kind of seen the kind of fruitlessness of it, again, as far as just holding up divisions and not meaning much aside from being able to gloat about that fact. So we have enough belts, in my opinion.
With the champ stuff, and Scott, I'll go to you for this. Do you feel like whenever a champion goes up a weight class, in a secret way, you're rooting for the guy that's defending the title because you don't want the divisions to be held up? Or do you enjoy the champ stuff that's going on?
It depends. I'll give you the most recent example was when Adesanya came up to fight Jan Blachowicz last month, I'm not sitting there rooting for anything, but honestly, I kind of would have preferred the result that we got where Jan won the belt and was able to keep going with it, because he hadn't really done anything with that belt yet against an actual light heavyweight. Like, he won it from a light heavyweight, but now you've got Adesanya coming up. And I mean, realistically, he hadn't earned the right to get that particular belt. I just didn't like the idea of that from the standpoint of the division. So it was, you kind of root for, like, okay, 205 held its own. Now they can be their own division, and let's see what we have here, and let Adesanya go back down and say, okay, let's see what else he can do. Because obviously, I don't think he lost the fight against Blachowicz because of size. I think he just wasn't better than Jan Blachowicz that night.
And he laid on his back a little too long, and I feel like a lot of people are pointing to him training jiu-jitsu a little too much compared to like trying to get up, defensive wrestling and stuff like that. But he lost the fight, and we got to move on. So the fight is coming up. I would like to get your guys' early predictions. I'll say mine first. I feel like Dustin Poirier goes in there and does the exact same thing. I feel like he'll beat him. What was it, the second round? I feel like that's probably what's gonna happen. The first round, they're going to feel each other out again, and then Dustin will take over in the second round or the third round and probably end up knocking him out. Dan, let's go to you first, man. What do you think? Early predictions on that.
Early predictions. You trapped me, John. I don't like these. Just kidding.
Oh,
I reserve the right to change my pick, but honestly, I think you said it well there. I feel like I've been leaning toward Dustin after what we just saw. I think he just essentially has grown into 155 better than McGregor has.
Scott, how about you?
I would have to agree, with the right to change it as well. I look at Conor, and I've routinely been a Conor doubter. So, like, I'm just going to put it out there. Like, my people close to me, they know that I'm somebody who often picks against Conor, even when I probably look like a dummy. But here, I just don't think his game has grown enough as the sport has grown in the intervening years since he did become the champ. He hasn't fought enough. He's a boxer, and then he just doesn't fight. He's had all these legal issues. It seems his focus is elsewhere for so long, so that in those times where he could be more focused, he could be growing with the sport. He could be observing the sport and the trends and these kind of things. And it just didn't seem that that's what's happening with him. So someone like Dustin, I have to favor here.
Yeah, Dustin is just hitting all cylinders, man. And he's taking advantage of it. He's out there doing, like media outside of MMA, and I think that's important for him to grow and get paid more, outside of it, more sponsorships, everything. So shout out to Dustin and doing his thing, man. He deserves every single penny. Let's get to these questions. The first question we got here is, I think Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor would have been more appropriate, as Tony risked his guaranteed title shot to fight Gaethje when it was unneeded just to bring sports back. But I think McGregor, Tony. Dan, what do you think of that? Do you think this was a more appropriate fight to make?
Yeah, when he chimed in on that, I was thinking more like that's maybe when you would pull your Diaz card when you were bringing this up earlier. I'm sure that's what spawned it for Alan. But I actually like Alan Bones Jones's suggestion way better. Maybe it's the old Tony mark in me, but I feel like it would have been due diligence. You would have had the angle as far as motivation goes for the countering management. And Tony, being a guy, another reason why, the unfortunate part of the champs outside of the first two, BJ and Couture, was that these were promotional favorites that were given these opportunities, right? In these cases. And when that happens, there are guys like Tony Ferguson for every instance that kind of get denied. And it would have been some retrieval, especially since Tony, I think, is kind of out of his prime. And I don't see a bright future for him, despite being one of his most ardent supporters. I love that idea.
Scott, what about you?
I like it too. I would be very interested in this because Tony, obviously, he's looking like he's very close to, and he's definitely in the back nine, but now he's starting to head, getting closer to that 18th green. You know what I mean? And I think if this is a fight that people want to see, you got to do it soon.
And also Tony, he's going back to the matchup, right? I wanted to pick Dan's brain on this. Is he's facing Beneil Dariush, right? And Beneil Dariush is making his second run towards the title. I think a lot of people forgot that he did make a one run and he got kind of like derailed by, you know, Edson and a couple of fights, you know, after that. But now he's looking like he's the best version of himself. Tony, you know, when you look at fighters, and I'm pretty sure you dissect this all the time, the trajectory and when they meet, you know what I mean? I feel like that's, you know, in this Tony versus Beneil fight, it's so important for Beneil right now, right? He's matched up with Tony at the perfect moment. Do you believe so?
I do. And, you know, a lot of times, whether it's rematches or fighters just maybe not a rematch, but like you kind of framed, John, they're just meeting further down the line in the space-time continuum. You know, the older guy tends to not do as well either, even though I tend to hate that narrative. And don't be fooled just because, you know, Tony's all crazy and active. He actually is the older guy. I know Beneil's got the grays. He looks like he's Solid Snake heading into Metal Gear Solid 4 over there. He just needs the eye patch and a mustache. But Beneil is on a run. Do not be mistaken, folks. And he is a dark horse, I think, in this division. Another reason why I kind of sentimented more with Allen's pick, because I feel like Tony's in for some more rough seas ahead with this Beneil matchup.
Yeah, you know, the George Clooney of MMA. I feel like a lot of people are saying that about Beneil Dariush, and it's kind of true, man. He's getting more handsome as he gets older. He gets gray, and you know, I think he should run with it. Like I think if he's gonna get a nickname, that would be the nickname, right? GC, right? Beneil GC Dariush, right? And they'll be like, "What's GC?" George Clooney. Come on, let's get it in.
GC.
I would watch Dariush's 11. That would be great.
Dariush is 11.
Yes, Dariush is 11.
That's perfect. Let me see what we got here. Degenerate Dane, he says, it's Dane. I think he's trying to spell my name. You guys missing one? Yes, we are missing one, but I do have it playing in the like in my peripheral. So if anything happens, I'll try to get your guys' reaction to it. But none of the big fights are on yet, so we'll wait for those later. All right. So let's get to some other guys. Man, Allen just okay. Here we go. All right. Let's see. Oh, this is perfect for Scott. Here we go, Scott. Who else is pumped for Jim Miller Saturday?
Hey, I'm always up for the Jersey guys. So, you know, let's see what we get here.
Yeah. So what do you think about the matchup? You know, he's facing a young guy, a guy that I believe only has one fight in the UFC, maybe two, right? Joe Selecki. He's also a Jersey guy, actually, that lives down in California. What is it, North Carolina or South Carolina? What do you think about the matchup? Have you ran into Joe Selecki in the past, Scott?
No, I have not. Our paths have not crossed. But you know, Jim Miller, he's basically, they've been kind of using him as a barometer for kind of these young guys, and typically when they throw him his way, he beats them back.
He does. Then, you know, you probably broke this fight down this week. What do you see in this one?
I didn't have to review the tape on Jim Miller, but I do still mean on going back to look on some Selecki. I do like Selecki, as I wrote him up on the Contender Series. He is the second coming of Kenny Florian. But boy, do I wish we would have got Kenny Florian in this spot instead. Like, give Jim Miller some veteran versus veteran stuff. This young guy stuff is just heartbreaking. I mean, he does come through, you know, more often than we like to realize. However, Jim Miller's just one of those guys. He's too tough for his own good. He's a guy I get emotional about. He's one of my favorite fighters, probably still my favorite lightweight of all time, not just active, of all time. He's a guy that the UFC built the backs off of. We're talking about McGregor, and how about the Lesnar era? How about the Rousey era? You know who was building below those cards? The UFC was building off the backs of Jim effing Miller. That's who. You know who Joe Silva, who, you know, does not give an inkling of respect to any fighter. You know who he revered and respected? Jim effing Miller. That's who. So to see Jim Miller get crappy matchups, and then he loses a match for the first time, which is kind of crazy. Granted, it is the COVID era in his illustrious history. They only give him the partial paycheck business, and then they rebook him against a young stud who I think is a bad stylistic matchup. To answer your question, John, I am picking Joe Selecki, but my heart's with Jim Miller, and I'm just upset. These guys deserve so much more respect on their name. And I know Jim Miller is neck and neck with Cerrone and Bisping on both appearance/lightweight wins. So I really want to see, you know, the UFC just don't give him a title shot. Just let him get some wins to cement himself in the history book for old Jim, eh?
No doubt. Jim Miller has the nastiest, meanest lightweight for the longest time. Yeah, it's true, man. Jim Miller is an OG. If there's a definition of OG lightweight, Jim Miller his picture is there in the dictionary, right? And then I like what you just said about Joe Selecki. He is the next coming of Kenny Florian. I'm gonna have to tell him that when I talk to him next time, ahead of his fight, I'll be like, hey, you're getting known as the next generation Kenny Florian, and he probably doesn't have no idea, right? But he'll probably enjoy that. He's one of those like laid back guys, right? So we'll see what happens. I'm also picking Joe Selecki in this fight. I feel like Joe Selecki is meeting. It's back to the Tony versus Beneil fight. They're kind of meeting at the right moments against each other, and Joe looks better every single fight, and I like his trajectory, so I'm giving him the edge against Jim Miller. What else we got here? We got after Saturday. Do they rebook Jim Miller versus Bobby Green or Jim Miller versus Cowboy 2 at 155 after Cowboy versus Diego? Scott, let's see what's your dream.
I would actually be interested in that Bobby Green fight. Bobby Green is another guy who, he was very, very active for a while. He had a period of time where he was off for quite a while too, but he's hard to put away. He's had some really tough fights in there, some tough decisions that went one way or the other, and I think the two of them would put together a really interesting scrap. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I if I had a choice, man, Bobby Green is always fun, right? Cowboy, always fun, but I want to see him face Cowboy again. I want to see, Jim Miller, the version of Jim Miller that has the Lyme disease under control. I believe he has Lyme disease for a long time, right? It was affecting him. Now it's under control. I would like to see that Jim Miller we see now versus a Cowboy, right? Because I feel like both of those guys need one of those veteran versus, just like Cowboy versus Diego. Dan, Cowboy versus Diego. Did you ever think that we were going to get this fight? I thought we were never going to get it.
Yeah, man, it's popped up. They've had their, dramatic spats. I'm not admittedly the biggest fan or follower of Twitter spats, but they've certainly had some that were public and otherwise. So that would have been a nice one to see. I got to go with Scott. I like the Bobby Green matchup a little better. It feels more right, like a veteran versus veteran. Although I still think that matchup goes bad for Jim because Bobby Green another guy doesn't get enough respect on his name, but for more stylistic reasons. He is still very much more closer to his prime and can beat and has probably beaten a lot of the prime competitors he's lost to recently, mind you. So, but I still would rather see that fight. As for the Cowboy and Diego, I actually wouldn't mind seeing Jim Miller rematch either of those guys. I know that his Lyme disease was especially affecting him undiagnosed during the Diego fight, perhaps during the Cowboy fight too, though again, even though I feel like they've come a lot closer, Jim can make that fight a lot closer stylistically. I still think Cowboy pretty much owns anybody who's 5'8" and under, which is Jim Miller.
Now we're gonna continue on the theme of this weekend's card. It was originally the Vettori versus Darren Till, fight. Darren Till broke his collarbone. He pulls out. Of course, I don't think anybody wants a fighter to fight with a broken collarbone. I don't understand how you would fight with a broken collarbone. It's like a very common injury for kids when they're young, right? When they like to jump off things and skateboard and bike or whatever, right? That's jumping around. A lot of kids get broken collarbones. So with Vettori, he's a very outspoken guy. He comes out, he doesn't care what people think. He'll say what he wants, and I love him for it. And then you got the other guy on the other side that's stepping in, Kevin Holland, same thing. He'd say whatever he wants. I'm surprised there's not more back and forth between Kevin Holland and Vettori. How do you like this matchup? Did you like, Scott, that Kevin Holland is getting like back-to-back main events, especially with the performance that he had against Derek Brunson?
Hey, it's opportunity knocks, man. The guy's available. He said a few weeks back, if one of them, falls out, I'm there. And sure enough, one of them fell out and he was there. If you're not going to step up, Kevin Holland will. And that's okay with me. I don't. The loss to Derek Brunson, it took some shine off, but especially now, if you get to jump back in, if you go in there and you beat Marvin Vettori, then the narrative changes, and it changes very quickly.
It does, and I feel like when he was heading into the Brunson fight, a lot of people were riding the train hard and heavy. Like Holland can go in there, he could probably finish Brunson and move himself up higher into the rankings, and that didn't happen. But now he's getting another chance, right? Now he's in the reverse position where no one believes, or I'm pretty sure there's some people that believe that he's going to win, but he goes in there as the heavy underdog. And Dan, when you break down this fight, where can Holland win, in this matchup? Because like I just said, heavy underdog.
Yeah, man, I think it's really going to have to be a knockout or bust, which is why it makes it hard for me to lean with Holland this time around. Although you could argue that it was knockout or bust last time, and that didn't stop me and many from picking him. However, Brunson has shown a susceptibility to being rocked, and even as bad as the performance was, and or whatever criticisms, rightfully so, you want a lot at Holland. He did have him hurt multiple times until arguably the crucial times he was taken down was from mat slips more than his wrestling, at least on those crucial times when he had Brunson hurt. So again, dangerous to count Holland out completely. Another reason why, people like myself were picking Holland is because he is 6-0, undefeated against southpaws until Derek Brunson, again, who wrestled him. So if Vettori wants to strike with him as a southpaw, that could be dangerous. That being said, I do still like Vettori here because he is durable. I don't know if it was Zane Simon from Bloody Elbow, but he compared him to the Grimace, and I can't get him out of my head. And to quote Clerk's animated series, nothing can stop the Grimace. So I can see maybe Vettori getting outpointed by other fighters. I was a little worried about his cardio earlier in his career, but the fact that Vettori's addressed that showed he can go 25 minutes on short notice himself, granted, against Jack Hermanson in his last time out. I do agree with the line being favored semi-heavily toward Vettori.
Vettori, that Jack Hermanson fight opened a lot of people's eyes, but he's been doing well since the Adesanya loss, right? He's on a long streak. He's had great performances, not just the Jack Hermanson fight. I feel like Jack Hermanson fight just made him just more visible to, certain parts of the fan base that didn't realize Vettori was out there. Scott, how impressed have you been with Vettori and his rise to becoming like a top 5 middleweight?
Well, what's really impressive to me is just the fact that it did happen very quickly and without kind of a long list of very noteworthy names. I believe he started his streak against Cesar Mutanch when he was still with the UFC. He had obviously the win over Jack Hermanson, but before that it was Carl Roberson, because they had that big beef in the hotel lobby. And then they finally got to have that fight, but Roberson wasn't really on the rankings radar of anybody or anything like that. So to get from that win all the way up to over Jack Hermanson, who I have a very high opinion of as a middleweight, a contender in the UFC, to get that win, I mean, it really is like just a meteoric rise. And how far away is he from getting back to Israel Adesanya? I don't know. I mean, everyone else has lost Adesanya too, so you can't even really knock him. He's got a split decision loss.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm big on Vettori, man. Like, I'm not a hype train guy, but I feel like he's proven himself. You know what I mean? It's not like he just started in the UFC and he just beat Jack Hermanson. Like, he's been around. He's been through the grind. I feel like all that work that he put in at King's MMA, when he moved over there like years ago, we're actually seeing the fruits of that labor now. You know what I mean? Because he is tough, like tough as nails. Like, he went in there. I think Jack Hermanson scratched him more than Freddy Krueger in a movie, right? Like, did you see him after the fight? Like, he was like scratched up. Like, it was weird. But that's how heavy his assaults were, right? Like, where Jack was just like kind of like clawing at him to get away. You know what I mean? And Jack, like, I like Jack. Jack is a great fighter, but that night Vettori just was an animal. He was just out there just mauling him right on the feet. So I feel like in this fight, we're gonna see an even better version of Vettori come out there. And I don't really put Holland as high as Jack Hermanson on my list. So I feel like it's gonna be a murder show, man. It's gonna be bloody, right? It's gonna get bloody, and I feel Vettori, he enjoys that too. He doesn't want to just go out there and knock you out. He wants to just beat the hell out of you. You know what I mean? Like, he enjoys that. And that's what makes him an animal. He kind of reminds me of a new version of Thiago Silva. I don't know why, but I think like he's going to start starching people, and he's going to be that guy that's just like the murderer. You remember Thiago Silva? Thiago Silva. I feel like people forget this guy. This guy was a madman.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny you choose those words, which, by the way, hopefully he doesn't go full Thiago Silva, if you know what I'm saying, or followed his life outside of the octagon. But yes, Thiago Silva was very scary, guys. I mean, one of those dudes where, like, I know, Rogan uses like, he's a killer, but like, this guy was one of the original ones where like he was doing the throat slicing thing after, decapitating Houston Alexander, who people were hyped about back in the day. So I love that reference, John.
For sure. Now with the I want to cover all bases, right? So we're gonna go to Bellator this weekend since we got a couple UFC guys fighting in the main event. I believe it's part of it's part of the Grand Prix. Light heavyweight Grand Prix, right? You got Ryan Bader versus Lyoto Machida, the rematch. I'm interested in this fight. You know why? Is because in the first fight, Machida just went in there, just did the little pop, and it was over. I was like, what? We didn't even get to see anything. Scott, what do you think about the rematch? Do you feel like Machida, he holds some kind of like psychological advantage over Bader, or do you feel like Bader's just too good and he's going to go in there and maul him?
Well, first off, I'm just because we bring up Machida's fight against Tito Ortiz was the first live pay-per-view fight I ever watched when I started getting into the sport. We're going back to 2008, UFC 84.
84,
BJ
baby.
Penn won in the main event over Sean Shirk. So when I watched Machida in that fight against Tito Ortiz, all my friends that I was watching with, first off, were totally against Machida. They were all on Team Tito. And I'm like, Machida's cool. I like this. He's got this karate style. This is great. So, like, he immediately became one of my favorites just watching him. So I've always, you have to kind of check your fandom at the door, but I've really enjoyed watching him fight whenever he comes out. So to get back to this fight, it's hard to pick against him because his style while it's been figured out, he's not this puzzle anymore. He's not the mysterious Machida era, He has aged very well. And I'm curious what Ryan Bader is after that last fight against Nemkov. Is it because Nemkov's so good, or is it because Bader's starting to head down? I don't know.
Dan, what about Machida? He is getting up there in age, and he's still, it doesn't really seem like he's lost a step because his style is the same. He's effective. He can still knock you out. The visual of Randy Couture getting his teeth knocked out is going to be embedded forever, right? So, like, Machida, if you could put a percentage on it, like, what do you see in this fight? What do you see? What's the percentage of him winning, possibly?
First, I got to say, I'm an even bigger. I was already a fan of Scott, but I'm an even bigger fan because he just dropped the UFC 84 reference, which was on my head because that's where I first saw Thiago Silva, who fought on that card, wreck the MGM buffet after weigh-ins and almost wreck a sushi chef who got in his way of loading fish onto his plate. But back to your question, I don't know if I can give you an exact number, but I will give you some interesting numbers, John. Ryan Bader is 2-0 in rematches. Lyoto Machida is 0-3 in rematches. Ryan Bader also 4-1 against career southpaws. The only southpaw he lost to, of course, was Machida, but I went back to watch that and I forgot. But Machida actually gets the knockout with a right hand, and you never see Machida he barely uses his right hand, much less knocks people out. So that was kind of a rare one for Machida. Although shout out to Tommy Toehold, it gave him a great visual gag of Bader running into fists over and over again that I never got tired of. Nothing against Bader, who I'm picking here. But yeah, it's hard to pick Machida. I agree with what you guys said. You guys aren't off for what you said. Machida, I think he has aged well. I think he can still be effective. And since he went over to Bellator, he looked like he took a hit off that fountain of youth over there, right? Neither here nor there. The point is, no matter what your regime is, speed is kind of the last thing to go. And counter strikers are what judges hate the most, right? Which is why even though he's 0-3, or the fact that, he's 2-2 in the organization, all of those kind of came by split decision, I believe. So it's not like he's getting blown out of the water, Machida. Again, to your point, John, about him still being effective, right? But with those two things, between speed being the first to go and judges, judging Counter-Strike as they do, it's hard for me. And I'm a Machida karate fan, by the way, but it's hard for me to like his chances this Friday.
You bring up a great point because his last two fights, because of that game plan, because of that style, he's lost split decisions to Musasi and who was the other guy? Phil Davis, right? So, yeah. So, I don't know. It's an interesting matchup. I'm gonna definitely be watching, and I'm gonna, I have to sway towards Bader. Look at his resume in the last 5 fights and what he's done, and he's done it at 2 weight classes. So we'll see. But like Scott was saying, has he recovered from that? Because he took a pretty nasty beating from Nemkov, man. That was that was one of those controversial stoppages, right? Where people thought you could have stopped the fight two times before he actually stopped it. So we'll see what happens with Bader. When you look at the light heavyweight Grand Prix, it's pretty legit, right, Scott? What do you think of the lineup, man? Bellator came through, right?
Oh, I like it. This is the one to do. I spoke to Scott Coker a couple weeks back, and he told me that they were originally thinking of doing the flyweight, women's flyweight division as the one. They were like, this is where we want to go. And then they kind of realized who they all had, and Yoel became available, and it worked out. And they're like, and especially Anthony Rumble Johnson, they're like, we have to do this, don't we? And I mean, they did. Look at the lineup. It really is legit. And the one thing that kind of interests me about the particular timing of this tournament is the fact that, as much as I respect Jan Blachowicz did not beat the champ to become the champ. He beat another contender to become the champ. He's not exactly the lineal champion in that sense. So if you want to make a case that the Bellator light heavyweight Grand Prix champion is the best 205 pounder in the world, I'm not going to fight you too hard on it.
You bring up a good point right there. I didn't even think about it like that. You are right. You are. They could make a good argument of who is the best light heavyweight in the world.
And they will.
Wins this. Yeah, and they will. Of course. It's promotion. And shout out to Scott Coker for putting this together. In this tournament, and that featherweight tournament has turned out to be phenomenal, right? Look at the main event or the finals of that. You got Pitbull, arguably the best featherweight and lightweight in the world, right? And against AJ McKee, a guy that's homegrown, that Bellator, formulated and like cultivated into this like potential big superstar if he beats Pitbull. It's a great finals. I'm excited to see that. But going back to the light heavyweights, Dan, they put together Yoel versus Rumble. Man, I love that they did this, right? Because a lot of people were probably saying like, oh, they should fight some up and coming guys and then they should meet later in the. No, I love that Scott was like, we should make this fight now before it's never gonna happen, and that attitude is beautiful, right?
Yeah, I think so, man. I say run with it. I like that they opened with this match. I like that they're flexing hard. You got to do it now before guys like Yuri Prochazka, Alexander Rakic, and Magomed Ankalaev get their deserved due, right? But right now, sure, I say make that argument and go for it because they do have some fun matchups. I know the rankings can be kind of tricky because like they don't have like Yagjimuradov, who is the more unknown guy who could be very live, by the way, on the side of the bracket that Machida and Bader are fighting. So that'll be interesting. I know that guy's not officially ranked in their rankings, but there are some, some live dogs as well, aside from the names in Bellator's light heavyweight division and in that Grand Prix.
Now, early predictions. Yeah, I know you don't like it, but I'm going to give you mine first, then you guys can go. With this heavyweight, light heavyweight Grand Prix, World Grand Prix, I'm going to go with Nemkov. I think Nemkov will be able to keep his title, and it's going to be incredible to just watch him beat. Because if you look at the side of the bracket that he's on, he has to face Phil Davis, who is a legit threat, right? If he beats him, that's a big win. Did he beat him already? No, right? Am I wrong about that?
Who's that? Nemkov? It was a split
Nemkov.
decision. It was a split decision. It was in Israel. It was like an untelevised fight in Israel. But he actually fought Bader and beat him by split. Phil Davis ended up on top of him in the third round.
That's right. So if he gets past Phil Davis, Nemkov does, then he's going to face the winner of Yoel Rumble, and that's just going to be insane, right? And then he goes to the finals after that, and whoever's on the other side, which could probably be most likely Bader, right? We could see the rematch, which we saw in the welterweight tournament, right? Where the new champion went all the way to the finals versus the former champion, and then the former champion beat the new champion, right? Am I wrong? Yeah, that's what happened, right? So that could probably play out like that. So I'm seeing the same thing happening. I think Nemkov is going to take this. I think the Bellator is doing a great job of just putting this tournament together, this Grand Prix, and then allowing their guy the best chance to go in there and prove himself. And I think that's the biggest thing. Scott, let's go to you. What do you think about the favorite in this tournament?
Yeah, I think you got to consider Nemkov the favorite coming in. He is the champ, and he has looked phenomenal. and there's too many question marks surrounding everyone else. You know, there's I'm not even going to try and say his name, the new guy who we've been talking about. You know, he's a question mark because he hasn't really fought the same type of competition over here. Everyone, you know, there's kind of the older guys like we talking about with Bader. He's not older, but he's been around. He's got miles on him. Yoel is very old, as we know, and we don't even know what Rumble Johnson is right now because he hasn't fought in several years. But I will say this: if there's a dark horse, I think it's whoever comes out of Rumble Johnson and Yoel Romero. I think I would be very interested to see the winner of that fight go all the way on to fight Nemkov, and especially if it's Rumble Johnson. Let's see what happens inside those 7 minutes before Johnson runs out.
All right, Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you guys are saying. I agree with Scott. Like, I totally think that Johnson Romero is the wild card, right? Because, you know, if Johnson gets past Romero, and there's interesting things about that matchup that I've written down before that could be interesting. Johnson, you know, could have a favorable matchup, or at least a fresh matchup, or one that stylistically where he won't fold against like a heavy wrestler. Because even if it's Davis, he already beat Davis, and Davis, unfortunately, it maddens me he doesn't use his wrestling, right? And Romero, I mean, even though he's kind of got that counterpunching thing where if it goes to the decision, it's not going to be great like Machida, except he's got much more finishing power. Hence, he's also a guy who finished Machida, by the way. He's got some wins over people in the bracket. So I love that. However, my dark horses would probably be Yagzhimuradov on the left side of the bracket. And I will say for the odds on as well, Phil Davis. Again, I'm going to pick Nemkov here with you guys. I think it'll be Nemkov Davis for a repeat. I'll go with John there. But I think that Phil Davis, for the odds that you're getting on him, and if you look at kind of how well he did, if he just, you know, gets it into his head, like I wish almost Phil Davis, like instead of being down at Alliance, like had his career up at AKA, because he would have been a forward moving guy using his wrestling. If he decides to do that, I think he's got a real chance to shake up the whole bracket. But my official pick will be Nemkov.
I think the people that don't follow the sport as closely, they're gonna look at Rumble and Yoel, right? Because they got that UFC juice, you know, and it's the fresh juice, not the old juice. You know, Bader and Machida got the old juice, right? But these guys got the fresh juice, so they're gonna look at it and be like, oh man, whoever wins that matchup is probably gonna win the whole thing because that's what they know, right? But for us, we know how good Nemkov is. We've seen him fight many times, and man, he that's why I put him as a favorite, man. Because a lot of the guys, man, like Scott was saying, there's question marks, there's age, right? How much have they deteriorated, right? And yeah, you got Machida. I think Machida's like in his 40s. Yoel's in his 40s. I think Rumble's getting in there like in his late 30s. I don't know. I think that's what he is. But none of us is talking about Corey Anderson, man. Like, is Corey Anderson, was the UFC right? Like, Corey Anderson is not like the guy that we should be investing in. Scott, why were we not talking about Corey Anderson?
Well, I mean, usually we'd be talking about beasting 25-8, but I guess we're outside of that time frame somehow. I don't know why we're not necessarily talking about him. I do think look, he's got a lot of, you know, youth on his side, which at least helps against some of these other guys, you know, that we're talking about. I don't know. I mean, I could totally see him running the table and getting it done, but I don't think of him at the same level as a Nemkov or against some of these, you know, powerhouses who fought for the title in the UFC in Romero and Rumble. I think the power that comes from them, it makes them, you know, sexy picks, right? Like they just look like someone who should just come in there and roll on the right night.
Definitely the sexiest of the sexy right now. Dan, you know, like Corey's matched up with the guy that is least known to fans, to us, right? And was that on purpose, do you think? Do you think that Corey is getting a layup? But it's not a layup because this guy's legit.
See, I'm thinking what you're thinking, but I'm thinking the opposite way, whereas I'm a contrarian, and I like Anderson. So if anything, you think I would be the one to have mentioned him, right? And maybe try to make an argument. However, it's the placement is why I perhaps was guilty of not mentioning him, and why I honestly, admittedly, don't think too highly of his chances. And I think that, in fact, that I'll go opposite of, I'm not going to say that you were insinuating that they were trying to give him an easy win or that you would be wrong. However, I think it's the opposite. I think that which sounds counterintuitive because you just signed the guy if you're Bellator. But I feel like if they wanted Corey Anderson to do well and get exposure, get the UFC rub, anything that you can, fairly accuse, if you want to use that word, of Bellator of doing, they could have easily done it by keeping the bracket the exact same guys. Now you just switch Phil Davis, who we've already seen against Nemkov, who, again, people forget how close that fight was. But Davis, even though he's a UFC name, not that marketable, not a lot of time left on there. He could potentially upset your sitting champ, right? The dangerous thing about putting champions in these things in the first place, the champion loses it in the tournament for whatever reason, right or wrong, the promotion will get crap for it. I mean, it was kind of a bad move by Bellator, if you ask me, to do that, because they could have just switched it. And then you get, oh, look at our new signee, a fresh matchup. Build up Corey Anderson. And that way, if Corey Anderson wins and you lose your champ, you get the UFC followers. It looks like you meant to do it. Or you build Corey Anderson in good faith that he's going to get wrecked by Nemkov, and it strengthens your champ. It strengthens the Bellator name. But no, they give him like a dude who, if you've not seen Yagzhimuradov fight, he looks like a little Mark Hunt, where he looks really difficult to take down in a scene that's full of Russian wrestlers where he comes from. So even though he's not the biggest, Corey Anderson has slimmed down for his light heavyweight frame as well, and tends to kind of struggle with potent counterpunchers, which Yagzhimuradov is. So really, it makes no darn sense why Bellator placed it this way. It could have been a simple fix to, in my opinion, have more sides win with bigger gains.
Who do you think, Scott, I'll throw this to you first. Who do you think is the most well-known and most well-liked fighter in this light heavyweight tournament?
Most well-known to what, the masses? Or
just masses? Yeah, just masses. Just someone that if they won the tournament, it'd benefit Bellator more.
I would say probably people still remember Machida the most. I mean, he goes back to a time when everybody was watching pay-per-views, every single pay-per-view. And I think that there's name recognition for that because he never really did go away. I think the one that would bring the most attention to Bellator, though, I think it would probably be, again, someone that came out of that Romero and Rumble fight. If either one of them came out of there, I think those are the most interesting because they hit like trucks, and we watched them in the UFC hit like trucks, and I think that's very marketable.
Dan, do you agree? Like that would be like the best outcome for Bellator?
I agree, and I know Machida sounds strange because he's like the elder statesman. He's the oldest of the fighters and whatnot, and he holds the most losses to people within the bracket. But like Scott's absolutely right. He was a title holder in the UFC. Not just a challenger. And no offense to that. And even though he hasn't won a Bellator title in the promotion that he's relevantly now competing in, he still holds a lot of that kind of old school fans, as well as something that I think Coker likes a lot, right? He has that old school martial arts vibe, which, Bellator, the promotion, and Coker himself is a big fan of. So I don't think it'd be the craziest thing to say that Machida should be the answer there. But if not, definitely somebody from the Romero Johnson fight.
Yeah, I think the highlight reel, and like you said, whatever's fresh, going back to the fresh juice, like everything's fresh in everybody's mind even with Rumble, I mean, if you just play his highlight reels, it's just, that's a regular fan, a so-called casual would see that and be like, who is this guy? This guy is terrifying, right? He's just like the knockout of Glover Teixeira with the teeth flying out. Like that's something you could just show a casual fan to be like, I like this guy already, right? So yeah, I could see.
But Bellator can't show those.
Oh, that's right. That's what sucks too, right? Like it sucks that Bellator can't show those highlights to promote their guys. Man, that's terrible. I wish they would work something out where they could show each other's highlights from different promotions. It's vice versa with Michael Chandler too, right? They can't show any of Michael Chandler's highlights from Bellator, right? So, man, we need to work something out. Come on, guys, you guys gotta, can't we all just get along? You know what I mean? Like, let's
all have the
it.
internet. We can catch it.
Exactly. Now let's see what we got here in the comments section. Oh, this is interesting right here. All right, so if Pitbull goes to the UFC, does he deserve the same promotion Michael Chandler got when he first got to the UFC? I would go even as far as to say if Pitbull beats AJ McKee and defends his 155-pound title. Dan, we'll start with you. Pitbull phenomenal talent. What do you think about Alan's thoughts?
Easy answer. It's an easy big yes. He absolutely deserves it. And he should, but will he, right? And I know people will immediately now as you kind of point to the UFC and you point to the Sage Northcutts and the Van Zants, and we can, speculate fairly, by the way, and criticize fairly, by the way, as far as who they like to promote. But I'm actually here's why I'm a bit dour on that, not just because of the likeliness of it happening and where Pitbull's career is at or where it will be if it does happen, but the fact that forget about the promotion in UFC and the critiques on who they choose to get behind and not. Like, how about the people that are supposed to promote the fighter? Whether it's like, his training partner who should be, is a mouthpiece for everything that's relevant to the UFC, Henry Cejudo, or Eric Albahassine, right, who is a manager and coach. And he's got wrestling creds as well, which not a lot of coaches have. So good on them. That is just like a strong thing, right? A strong backing. But then you look at his interview recently, I don't know if it was with Ariel or whatnot, but you have them like trying to like stop in and take the spotlight, which is not a surprise at all when you look at a coach like Eric Albahassine, who I rightfully give him credit, but ego's easy to call out, sir. And there's way too much ego over there. It's kind of gross. And it really bothers me in this hypothetical thinking about like, not only would Pitbull have to like go against the insurmounting promotional scene machine and whether or not it chooses you, that is the UFC, but he'd probably have to, fight his own people for the spotlight, which is quite sad. And Pitbull deserves better.
Man, you make some great points there. And I've interviewed Pitbull in the past, and I've never had Coach Eric come on. Maybe I'm not big enough. I'm kind of offended that he doesn't pop on there and try to get some shine. You know what I mean? Like, I got to go through his manager, and his manager is a very capable translator, speaks English phenomenally and speaks Portuguese phenomenally. Yeah, it was weird. That interview was weird. And Pitbull, if you see his facial expression, he doesn't look too happy. You know what I mean? Like, he's pretty stoic, right? And he's normally stoic, but you could get him to crack a smile once in a while. But man, it's I think that whole situation is a very weird situation, and I'm trying to get an interview with Pitbull in the next couple of days, so I want to kind of ask him about that, a little dig into it a little bit. But so going back to the question, Scott, what do you think about Pitbull when he goes into the UFC, if he ever does? Do you think they'll do that for him?
Well, first I'm going to shut down, and I don't think it's actually going to happen. I just don't understand why it hasn't happened already, because he's been with Bellator for 11 years and he's had opportunities. So if he's been content before, what's the point now? I mean, you could say that, yes, if he does win this tournament, beats AJ McKee, and then defends his 55 title again, yeah, I mean, his stock could be bigger than ever. And maybe that is the point where he says, all right, especially if Chandler is the champion, if he goes over and says, okay, I just want to have the UFC belt, I know I can just beat this guy and do it. But I just don't see it happening. Let's just, for hypotheticals, sure. Let's go with it. Let's say he does. I mean, I would be so thrilled, first off, because I've been a big fan of what he brings to the cage since he made his Bellator debut. I mean, back in the Bjorn Rebney tournaments, he was just so much fun to watch. He's been so much fun to watch. And the fact that he really is as great a fighter as he's ever been at this point, I think it's not just a big fish, small pond thing. I think we're watching someone who is a transcendent talent that he just hasn't had the same stage as everyone else. Oh,
man, it is true, man. Like, Pitbull is phenomenal talent. And if it lines up perfectly, and a lot of it has to do with contract issues and everything. But if Chandler becomes not the president, but the champion at lightweight, I would, if I was Pitbull, I would be pushing to get out of my contract, and I would actually be talking to the UFC and seeing like, okay, if I do go over, what can you do for me? Because I feel like if Pitbull does move over, he needs to get what he deserves, right? He should not move over just because he wants the UFC title. I think like money has to do a lot with what Pitbull pursues, right? Like, he has a family, what I mean? Nowadays, a lot of guys are chasing the money rather than chasing the title. I know the title brings money, but sometimes it doesn't bring more money than certain fights, and certain promotions will pay you a lot of money. For example, Demetrius Johnson, he's getting paid a lot, and he's getting paid way more than the UFC paid him. Eddie Alvarez, I heard he's getting paid way more than the UFC paid him. And you could argue that Eddie Alvarez is not in his prime still, right? Like he's kind of like Tony Ferguson on the back nine, close to the not the 18th hole, but maybe the 13th or 14th hole, right? We still got a couple more to go for Eddie Alvarez. So I would love to see Pitbull in the UFC, but it's hard to like imagine that happening. And I love that he's promoting himself, right? And his English is getting phenomenal, man. A lot of fighters should learn from that, right? If you want to grow in this sport, if you want to, especially doing interviews, it's not the best to have a translator. It's best to just, if your English is decent, just to do the interviews. I think Khabib turned the corner when he started speaking English, right? He had a bunch of, memorable sayings like send the location and I smash, right? Like those things are like things that you'll remember for a long time that he came up with. So, I like it. I want to see that happen. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. All right, let's see this. All right, Chandler KOs Oliveira, Poirier, McGregor 3 winner. Just how good is Pitbull? Well, it's like this is all MMA math, right? Like this is all MMA math, and it's hard to gauge like, okay, how good Pitbull is great. We know that. Like them beating them or this guy beating this guy, it doesn't really matter, right? We know Pitbull knocked out Chandler, and that's all we need to know. And he's great. So let's move on. Let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, so let's go to the next topic, right? The Ultimate Fighter is actually back. The Ultimate Fighter is actually back. I thought it was never going to happen. Then, the coaches are Alex Volkanovski and Brian Ortega, something that we never expected. Everybody was hyped for like Colby and somebody, right? I thought that was going to happen. If I was going to watch the Ultimate Fighter again, I would want to see Colby and somebody, because I know that it's going to be must-watch TV with Colby, because Colby's going to go to that line, dance on the line, maybe step over it a couple of times, and it's going to get a reaction from people, right? And that's what they want on the Ultimate Fighter, but they didn't do that. They went the totally opposite of the spectrum and went with two of the nicest guys you'll ever meet in Brian Ortega and Alex Volkanovski. When you heard the news, what was your reaction, Dan?
Disappointing. Granted, again, it probably not surprising if you know me. I have not watched a single episode of Tough since Kimbo was on the thing. Tough 10, I believe that was. So that kind of tells you my excitement for the show. And then, after the holdout and the promises that have been going on since I don't know, maybe like 2019, I believe. I remember those post-fight scrums over at the Apex with Dana like teasing us like we got some big stuff coming to ESPN, having this big meeting, reviving the Ultimate Fighter in a big way. And like that dates back to like 2019. So it's been longer than a year or a year and a half even. We've been waiting for this. I think 2020 warped our brains. So then to be clearly like whether, they were just banking for a Khabib or a Colby to, fill in the slot kind of a deal, which I think would have been smart. You do Colby Leon, help Leon get some of his balance out or something. And then you do either Poirier for the title while, Conor faces Tony, right? We already laid out the hypotheticals previously in the show. Rewind if you're watching now, folks, and you missed that. So, you could definitely go that route. I definitely see what you're saying there. They could have certainly done that. But like you said, we get two nice guys where Volkanovski seems just like a vetted nice guy through and through, a big fan. And Brian Ortega, I've seen this guy interact with fans and media behind the scenes. Nothing but a class act and nice guy. That being said, we've also seen him when he tries to go above the line. He kind of can step over the line too. So I don't know if he'll be doing himself any favors. I think that, if anything, either guy may risk, bringing their likability down, even if they don't mean to. We've seen the edits of the show, right? Or the fallouts and stuff. I believe Eddie Alvarez and Lauren Murphy and some other fighters, they do this every season, and from what I hear, it only seems to get worse. So I hope those guys are careful because I like both guys. I probably won't be watching, though. I know that's terrible promotion. I work in this space. I shouldn't be saying that, but I probably won't be watching it.
The big question for you, Scott, is will you be watching?
No. No, I'm with Dan. I don't watch The Ultimate Fighter. I have tuned. Probably the last time I was really into watching The Ultimate Fighter was the live season that Michael Chiesa won. I was interested in that one because you were actually getting live fights. You really didn't know what was happening, and we did end up getting some pretty interesting talents come out of that season as well. In Chiesa and of course Region Iaquinta, who doesn't understand why you guys are booing him. F y'all. Just had that anniversary. I've tuned in here and there for some of the women's seasons when they've opened up the new divisions, because I'm always interested when especially the women's divisions have always fascinated me, and I'm glad that now we have the gaps filled in, especially 125. So when they started that, I definitely wanted to keep my eye on it, even if the 125 division didn't have maybe some of the best talent, because Valentina wasn't a part of it. To get back to this season of Tough, no, I'm not going to be watching. I'll be paying attention because, you got to at least know what's kind of happening, but I'll get that through social media, or I'll read some articles here and there. Dan won't be writing any of those articles, so, that's fine.
I heard, this is what I heard. I don't know if it's out there in the internets, but I heard that the season will be bantamweights and middleweights. But I don't know if it's going to be bantamweight women or men. It's hard to believe that they would do bantamweight men, right? It's just, isn't that division stacked enough? Like guys that are not in the top 15 are just monsters, right? And I feel like the roster is pretty filled up. I wonder if that is going to happen. Have you heard anything, Dan, about like what weight classes are
I've also heard, I've also seen nothing official, I guess, but from the communique I've seen publicly and behind channel, looks like it's bantamweight and middleweight. My question is, I think it's more likely to be bantamweight and middleweight aliens, not men or women, because I feel like all the fighters have been scooped up and scraped to Contender Series. We're seeing fighters that, I hate saying this, but it's a criticism that's been thrown, and probably thrown fairly at this point. We've seen a lot of fighters that maybe don't belong in the UFC getting their shots, and I'm not hating on that. I love that these people are having an opportunity to get paid. It's a tough world out there. I'm not making those judgments, obviously, on those people. I'm just saying it is what it is, right? To borrow a phrase from Max Holloway, it's like we're scraping bare bone talent, and I'm glad to see regional promotions from promotions here in the U.S. under the Fight Pass umbrella, or One Championships over in Asia doing their thing as they're going live while we record this not to timestamp things. However, you hear things with it's got to be a butterfly effect, right? I heard people from the UK speaking about this, whether it's the Irish MMA scene or English or the mainland Europe. It's that this is going to have a big effect, depending on the regulations, how certain places were hit, how strong their scenes were, how many opportunities there were in the first place. But there's going to be some real recovery time, just like the economy. MMA is its own economy, and generating these fighters have not ever been the easiest thing, even with as big and as fastly booming as the sport is now. Still not the easiest thing. So I think we've yet to see and fully feel the effects, but perhaps that's the question that you're asking, John. It's the right one. Perhaps we can get a glimpse into the kind of overall worldwide talent level to see what the Ultimate Fighter can come up with, right?
Scott, if you had the choice, like, I know you're not going to watch it, but what class do you think that the UFC needed to put on the show?
Well, before I answer that, I do want to say that, you were kind of talking about why they would pick something like bantamweight. And the one thing I remember about a lot of these tough seasons, especially the ones that I stopped following, is it felt like every season was lightweights and welterweights, which the UFC just had they had everyone. I mean, not they had everyone, but I mean, they had, I think at one point, like 40% of their roster was between 155 and 170. And they said, hey, let's get more. So they did that, and I'm not surprised that they would do something like that with bantamweight, because at the very least, too, some of these bantamweights they bring in maybe are guys who are on the smaller side that say, I can go down to 125. And 125, they're obviously recommitted to it. They like Figueiredo. Figueiredo's an interesting champion. I'm interested to watch that guy. So they could certainly get talent out of there. But to answer your question, what divisions do they need? I think men's flyweight is definitely one that they need. They need very badly, I think, women's 135, because it's very stale there. We kind of have seen contenders get pretty close to the top, but then they kind of stumble against women who have already had their shot. Juliana Pena, she lost to Germaine de Randamie. She picked up a win, and now she looks like she honestly could be a rightful contender for the belt now, and I would have no problem with that because we haven't seen that fight yet between her and Amanda Nunes. So I do want to see some new blood in divisions like that, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that either they do men and women flyweight or they do men's flyweight and women's bantamweight. The reason why I like that is because they can train with each other. When you got bantamweights and middleweights, they're less training partners, right? In that room. Why wouldn't you want more training partners for the fighters that are on the show, right? It's just going to be beneficial for them. I don't know. It is very confusing that they would do bantamweight and middleweight. Like, I don't know. Middleweight seems like it's moving along pretty good right now, right? There's some up and coming guys. There's the top of the division is pretty stacked. So we'll see. Now with Volkanovski and Ortega, right? They're both gonna, they were supposed to fight a couple weeks ago. Now they're gonna delay the title fight because they're gonna have to fight after the show. So what does that do to the division? What kind of matchups do you see them putting together? Because you got Max Holloway, Dan. He's probably legit the next guy in line. Maybe does it depend on like if Ortega wins or not? I don't know. But should he fight somebody else? Where does the beat fit in here? Korean Zombies, matched up with Dan Ige. Huge opportunity for Dan Ige. What do you see? What kind of matchups? Yair is floating out there too. What do you see? What do you need? What do we need to put together?
I think Max Holloway is the big question mark because he already had that kind of purgatory field just for the fact that on paper he's 0-2 to Volkanovski. I know the second one was close, particularly, right? But still, and Max Holloway's looked great. So I'm believe me, obviously there's an argument for a third fight. But with Volkanovski booked, now Max Holloway, I think, is kind of the biggest problem. Does he take a fight up at 55 for fun? Are there fun fights that he can take here? I think the biggest victory from all this is that we might, and I know everyone's been waiting for 3 years. Those of us who've been following more realistically, probably for 4. But I think, before we get to year 5 with Zabit in the UFC, we may actually finally see the guy in a 5-round fight, for goodness sakes. Because I went from a guy who was obviously high on him, following fighters from that region when he came in and what he's done since, and a guy who kind of tempered the hype that a lot of people have been giving overly to Yair. However, now at the point they're meeting and the progressions that Yair has made, I need to see these two guys kind of vetted out. That's my silver lining to things being stacked up, is we can finally get some answers, some questions answered with guys like Zabit or Yair. Zabit in a 5-round fight or Yair against a guy like Max. That's kind of where I would like to see.
Phenomenal matchups right there, Scott. What do you do with the division at the top?
It is tricky because there are some interesting contenders there. But then there's, you've got guys who kind of come off of a loss, like Chan Sung Jung. He was just booked recently too. I can't remember who was he booked against.
Ige,
that's right. Yes, thank you. So I don't know. It's kind of a tricky situation. I don't know if I have a ton to add on to what Dan was saying, honestly. But I am interested to see what could happen out of that's a that Yair kind of situation. Max is he's in a tough spot. I don't know that he would take 155. I think he would take it if someone said, "Hey, here's a fight." Max Holloway's going to take the fight. I don't know if I want him up at 155 right now, though. I like him at 145, and I think he got so much juice off of that win over Cater, and Cater is still recovering from that, which we're hearing recently is just he's still kind of in concussion protocols from that. So that was quite a beating delivered. Max is obviously he's the loser here. It kind of stinks for him, but he might have to take that 55-pound fight, like we're saying.
You know what would be interesting, and I know you're not going to watch, but if Max somehow slid into the Ultimate Fighter somehow, like he got in there and caused some chaos, he's a guy that likes to joke around and, play some pranks. I think that would be a nice addition, right? Max will sneak in and pull some pranks on everybody, but nobody knows it's Max, right? But except for the viewers. And then, then they get the big reveals like Max has been messing with you. He's been pissing in your Gatorade or your what do they drink over there? I don't know, right? But I think that they need to add some kind of element, right, to the show. It can't be the same Ultimate Fighter. Nobody wants to see that 5,000 times in a row, right? It just doesn't work anymore. So maybe, maybe they're gonna put like barbed wiring on the top of the cage, or like throw some pro wrestling in there. They gotta dress up. I don't know, man. Just do something. But it's what is it? Let's see. Van C. He said, tough season, light heavyweight, where the winner of each get a title shot and $1 million. Oh, so he's making a suggestion that they should get a title shot and $1 million. I don't know if UFC is gonna come out the pockets like that, right? It's not something that they're known to do, right? That's Bellator and PFL and one championship. Isn't that the craziest thing too? Is that one championship, they had a tournament that the winner won $1 million. Bellator has a tournament, the winner wins $1 million. And PFL, their whole thing is based off winning $1 million. But the UFC can't do that for their fighters. Man, doesn't that kind of rub you the wrong? It rubs me the wrong way, man, a little bit, that they can't offer that to the fighters.
I mean, I think we're still having issues with these dang bonuses, right? I mean, when's the last time we saw a 60 or a 70 or $100 bonus, or, back when, Dana disagreed with the decision, how he would like bonus both guys to get back at the commission. Like, I miss that attitude. If you want to talk about, UFC generosity, that kind of, of that golden era, a lot of us became fans of if we weren't covering the sport at that time. So I have my own issues with that and how they delegate their bonuses and shorten that whenever they can is kind of upsetting in its own. Like the what was it, the Joaquin Buckley, that was worth $1 million when you look at the times they're going to use that on a replay. But it's upsetting, but that is also one of the lures of tournament format. And again, it's not that these organizations it's not like they're paying like the greatest show purses for the tournament either. There's some balance there too. Not saying one's better than the other, folks, but it is something that's kind of glaring and disappointing for UFC being the biggest promotion. Yet when it comes to paying these guys, man, especially like spots where like it's great PR for them, and it really I don't know if they would miss it too much from the bottom line. Bills and buyouts aside, I just feel like it'd be good PR for them, selfishly even.
Yeah, they definitely will. Scott, what do you think about tournaments? UFC is not known for tournaments, but would you like to see a tournament in the UFC?
Well, I would love to see a tournament, but I did get the chance to speak with Dana back in, I think it was February, and this is when he was talking about the what they were planning to do with lightweight. They hadn't really formulated everything, but he kind of framed it as sort of a tournament. But then I said, "Is this an actual tournament?" He's like, "No." It's like there's a definitive line he wants to draw where it's like, no, we're not doing tournaments. No tournaments. It's almost like this is like outlawed. The idea that this word is used, but they're still more or less kind of doing it because they're going to have a fight here and a fight here, and then the winner will probably end up fighting here. Is that not a tournament?
Real quick, it's kind of cursed though, because like not just lightweight, which did try to do a 4-man tournament with like Sarah, BJ Penn, Cal Uno, and Din Thomas, I believe, and that ended up with like Cal Uno and Penn in a draw, right? There was no winner, and like that was like the second or third time they tried and failed with the lightweight division. But like even lightweight aside, I almost don't blame Dana and the brass for having that PTSD, because what was the matchup we were just talking about, guys? In Bellator going down, it's Bader versus Machida. And when I went back to watch that almost 9 years ago on UFC on Fox 4, I don't know if you guys remembered, there was a kind of unofficial, Dana wouldn't say it was a tournament, right? But they said, who gets the next shot between Jones? Because Jones beat everybody. So Brandon Vera and Shogun was headlining the card that night, remember? So they said that whoever has the best performance of the night will get the rematch with Jones. And if you did the math, you had, the guy who got beat by Jones the most recently was head and tails Machida. Therefore, Machida would have been the worst guy to have the best performance that night. And sure enough, Machida did have the best performance that night, even though I would give the fight of the night one of the most underrated fights, by the way, that Vera and Shogun fight, folks. And then what did they do? They went, oh, yeah, about that. I don't remember promising anybody a title shot. It never happened. So I agree with Scott. Just want to strengthen his point there as far as the UFC drawing that line.
Well, the funny thing is, too, I mean, you're talking about, like, all the times where Dana's like, hey, we're going to do this. Like, the winner here gets the title shot. I think of all the times where John Fitch was a win away from a title shot. He'd get that win. It's like, well, we didn't think it'd be John Fitch, so I guess we're going to go in a different direction.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think Dana, talk about PTSD. I think he has PTSD from when he went over to Pride and took Chuck Liddell into the tournament. And he like was so confident, and he had all this money on Chuck Liddell, and then Chuck Liddell goes in there and gets crushed, right? It's just, I think that is still a nightmare that he has, right? So he's just like, tournament is not, Grand Prix is not in his vocabulary. Like, a thing that comes out loosely in his mouth, right? So yeah, I can see why Dana doesn't want to do tournaments, and it's okay. UFC doesn't do tournaments. It's fine. He says the tournament is what? The Ultimate Fighter, right? So okay, the tournament is the Ultimate Fighter, whatever. It's
the
all
least
good.
interesting of the tournaments.
Yeah. This is actually a good suggestion. Sterling versus Hyon, too tough, would be interesting me more, to be honest, but I guess I'll watch the first show. Yeah, I think this would have been a good show to have right here, because there is a lot of animosity. Hyon is getting better at English, and even with his English not so well, I think he could get his points across to Sterling. And Sterling is so on the defensive now that it's like, I think people would watch it. I think it'd be more interesting. The question is, Dan, would this little what would you call it? Scuffle, what I mean? This little beef that they have growing, would that be enough to get you to watch the show?
It could be, because Hyon is one of those dudes who, like, the knee that he threw wasn't the first time that he shot himself in the foot. The guy was supposed to, represent his country a lot higher than he did in boxing, but the dude couldn't, like, avoid getting in fights, like, while he was in that competition zone. So he was actually disqualified. So, to something like tough, with obviously there being bad blood, like, I think the UFC would absolutely get what they want there. I'm surprised they didn't go for that. Aljamain already has residents out here. He could get his coaches. He could train. Eric Nixick, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away to go film while he could still do his duties. And Peter Yan, who is based out of Russia, granted, has been traveling for camps his whole career, whether he's been going to Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand or South Florida now to American Top Team. So why not continue to get more American wrestler looks in Las Vegas? Would have made a lot more sense. Maybe not logistically, since, Ortega and Volkanovski are stuck, but I would have preferred it.
Scott, what do you think of Yan and Sterling?
Look, that really would have been much more fascinating for all the reasons that Dan said. But, and I did have the chance to speak with Peter Yan earlier this year. This is the only time I've spoken with him, and it was through his translator. But the sense that I get from him is that he's very much a family man. He misses his family. He's very conflicted about being away from his young children, his young boys. It's so far away, even for the times that he is. So I would have to take a guess, as father myself of young children, that if he didn't want to be away from them for camps, if he doesn't enjoy that, why would he add something like this on top of it, where then he's then going to have to go right into a camp, and then he won't see his family for, potentially 3-4 months or something like that. I couldn't do it, and if he's that into his family, I get it.
Well, with Peter, he, whenever he did camps in Thailand, he would have his family there, his wife and his kids. They were staying there with him the whole time, all of his camps. Ever since he went to Thailand, ever since he had kids, they would always be together. So I don't think it'd be a big obstacle for the UFC to just have him have a house out here, an Airbnb home, stay with his kids, enjoy Las Vegas with them. You know what I mean? And he benefits, right? He gets to grow his audience on the Ultimate Fighter. But we're just, this is just fantasy picks of
sure.
For the show. You know what I mean? So
two quick things I would say though is his kids are older now, and their school and these kind of things. Yeah. Just I consider as a father, and the other thing is the fact that we're obviously in a little bit of a different world these days.
Yeah, definitely in a different world. But yeah, this. Like you guys said that you guys are not watching the show, but I'm a little bit more invested in the camps, because I talk to like their coaches a lot. Like I talked to Ortega's striking coach a lot. So I texted him when I found the news, and I was like, I'm happy for you. You're going to get more exposure as a coach on the show. And I texted Volkanovski's coach, same thing. I said the same thing to him. And he's just like, and you know what? They deferred to their fighter. Which shows, good character for these guys. They said that it's a good opportunity for the fighter, for Brian Ortega, for Volkanovski to grow their audience a little bit more. And it's actually better for Volkanovski, because he, let's be real, he's not that popular. And it kind of allows, this is what the coach, told me. It's like, it's going to allow Volkanovski to show his real side, how he can be a likable guy, how he can be a great coach and a mentor to other fighters, and which he's been doing for many years now, just locally in Australia. So he says that it's just like it's going to be an opportunity for the fighters to grow the profile. They don't see really any beef going down between these two guys because that's just not who they are. But you never know. You never know. You know what I mean? The fighters that are on the show could create something. Who knows? But I doubt it will happen. Now, before we go, there's just one more topic. Like, let's talk about Vettori. You know what I mean? If Vettori beats Holland, right? And we'll start with Scott first. If Vettori beats Holland, do you feel like he lines up for the title next?
I have trouble picking somebody that I would say definitely would go over him, but I would have to think if Robert Whittaker impresses next week against Kelvin Gastelum, he would have the edge. I mean, he's a former champion. He's a more recognizable name. There's more marketing that they can do from a worldwide perspective because they have that whole market. Look, I'm a descendant of Italians and everything like that. I love Italians, but Italy is not the MMA hotbed yet, if it is ever going to be. So it's not the same type of thing. I think they would prefer to go in that direction. But at the same time, if Vettori goes out there and, you know, he knocks his teeth out or something like that, if he looks really impressive, it changes the calculus because it's done on ABC in front of a bigger audience too. So who knows?
Yeah,
I didn't answer your question though.
It's all good. It's all good. Go ahead.
I'm gonna lean a bit on my Italian bias too, like Scott. You know, I got a little bit of Italian in me too. Got some passion, right? Like the passionate Vettori. That being said, I do feel like Vettori is a dark horse. But as I kind of touched on a podcast I actually recently did about dark horses, is that the ones in the middleweight division are really tough to get excited about because, like Scott said, there is a guy floating around with the name of Robert Whittaker. And I think people were a little bit too hard on him, as we tend to be fickle fans in the sport, when someone takes a knockout loss and he lost his title to Israel Adesanya, and B, you know, he did the terrible thing where he admitted that, you know, mental burnout, mental vulnerabilities, you know, the fact that he addressed his psyche makes him weak to like 90% of MMA fans, which is silly, obviously, because he seems rewired. And if the wiring still holds strong and he doesn't seem deterred like Robert Whittaker doesn't, I feel like he's going to be turning away a lot of contenders. He's already beaten a more durable, more powerful, more dangerous southpaw in Yoel Romero. I think it's a dangerous fight with Vettori, but I think he can just outpoint him and frustrate him, which sucks because I want to see Vettori get a rematch. I just think that unless they bypass the UFC brass, Robert Whittaker, I think Robert Whittaker is going to turn him and many others away.
Israel's gotten into this position where it's pretty much he gets to control like who fights next, right? And you know, good for him, man. Like you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm the champion. I don't control who I fight," but it's a business at the same time, and you want to hold that title as long as possible. So that's why they're always pulling for Darren Till. You know what I mean? They know that Darren Till is a big name, but it's a very, very winnable fight. It's a very good matchup for Israel and the team, and it's probably easy to game plan too, right? It's not as much work as a Robert Whittaker, as a Vettori, right? Where I think those guys are big threats, right? Big threats in that division. Yeah, man. Hour and a half. We're almost there. Man, it went by so fast. I think we're just like rapid fire. So before we head out, Scott, tell everybody where they can find you. If you got some stuff down in the pipeline, or if you got some stuff recently that you uploaded, tell everybody about it and where we can find it.
Yeah, I mean, you can always find my work at the New York Post. nypost.com/sports is the easiest way to get there. You know, I'm always writing MMA. Every week I've getting the opportunity to speak to, typically it's the headlining fighters. This week I did speak to Marvin Vettori. I haven't posted that story yet, haven't written that up. Today I did come out with a story about Miesha Tate. We spoke last week. And I'm actually very proud of the way this one came out. I got the chance to tell her story of what she had been up to for the last 4 years while she was away from fighting. She really had kind of reached at a mental and emotional breaking point where she needed to step away and kind of find herself. And she was very open about everything. I was blessed to be able to tell her story. So I hope you'll check that one out. You can find me on Twitter at Scott_Fontana, and I'm close to 1,000 followers. So, you know, give me a few more tonight, hopefully.
Yeah, follow him definitely, man. And Dan, what you got? Of course, you got the website. You got MMA Junkie. What can we see you?
I gotta say, double down on following Scott. He's good people. I'm looking forward to those interviews, Scott. But yeah, you can just find me on Twitter while you're going over to follow Scott. You can just type in Dan Tom MMA. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to everything and like everything. My man John does, by the way. But if you're on YouTube, yeah, you can pop over to Daniel Tom MMA and give me a subscribe there. Got some top 5 shows, top 5 dark horses, and some other things I dropped. Hopefully, I'll have you gentlemen on the show sometime once I can get back on track with this UFC schedule. But man, this was awesome to come here and chat with you as always, John. It's a pleasure, and to be in a little menage a trois with another man I respect there, and Scott. This is awesome, man. I love you guys. This is great.
Yeah, I second all that. That was great. Thank you very much for having us, John. I don't do too many of these, so I'd be happy to do more.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like the chemistry, when you know that there's chemistry, like when you hop on with 3 people, 2 people, it's a little bit easier, right? You're just going back and forth. But if you have 3 people, and I try my best to kind of like guide through it, as best as possible. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But today was very smooth. Yeah, definitely follow these guys. I'm jealous of these guys. The reason why they're verified. They got the blue check. I don't know when I'm gonna get mine. I probably never will, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
It doesn't
right?
mean anything.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't really make anything different for you. One thing is you could always check these guys out during the live UFCs because you're gonna see their tweets on the corner of the screen, and me too. For some reason, we end up.
You got
on
a
there.
verbal shout out from Brendan Fitzgerald.
Yeah,
yeah,
that was awesome.
Brendan, I gotta give it props to Brendan, man. He's I actually interviewed him like a couple weeks back, like a month or 2 back, and he was great. I want to interview him again, and yeah, that came out of nowhere. I didn't even expect that. I was just like, wow, thank you so much, Brendan. Maybe I should get him on. Actually, he doesn't do the live shows, but we'll see what we can do with Brendan in the real soon. Yeah, so yeah. Follow these guys, man. And if you guys are rewatching this, make sure to leave a comment, subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. Thank you to these guys. We're going to have them back on. I'm going to have them back on with different people because I like to kind of like rotate through. And it's always fun to kind of get in there and connect with different people, right? So everybody watching, thank you so much. Thank you to these guys. And we'll see you next week.